Hi.
So I'm gonna start it off. We're just gonna start with some introductions. I think I'm gonna change it up a little bit and ask you to introduce yourselves and then tell us something about you that probably nobody on the call knows. And I'll start so it's not awkward. My name is Andrew Gardner. I work for the Hierarchy. I help companies and employers with their recruitment, marketing, advertising, technology, or whatever, just their challenges and their hiring initiatives, which has afforded me the opportunity to meet and work with people not unlike the esteemed panelists on the call today, which is really gratifying. You guys are going to be stoked because we're going to have unfettered access to the people that are behind the curtain, doing, the object of our affect, let's say. And what don't you know about me? I love amphibians, especially frogs. I'm just fascinated with the fact that
Cool.
these things are born underwater and then they learn how to breathe and then they live outside the water. That blows my mind. Okay, so that's me. Okay, let's go to you, Grant.
Hi, I'm Grant Weinberg, the VP of Talent Acquisition, HR Operations, and HR Tech at TriNet. I've been there coming up to 2 years, responsible for everything that sits in those three buckets. What don't you know about me? Andrew and Bev know this about me, but I like to see myself out of work as an international DJ. Having DJ'd in South Africa, London, other parts of the world, and now San Francisco. And only last night I was in the city doing a live stream for one of the nightclubs.
Cool.
And you're quite good at it.
I try.
Okay, Wendy, why don't you go next?
I'm Wendy Sun, Director of Talent Acquisition at Omni, and I've actually been with Omni just under a year, actually, so fairly new to the company, but great organization. I've been within the recruiting and staffing industry for over 20 years now. So I started when I was 5, just to make it clear to everybody. And something you don't know about me is I love to travel. So I've been extremely antsy these past several months being stuck at home. So can't wait until restrictions are lifted internationally to be able to do some travel there.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, Katrina, how about let's hear from you?
Hello, everyone. I am Katrina. I lead the global technical recruiting team over at Box. So oversee end product and design hiring in all of our offices, including our new build out of our Poland office, which is very exciting and poses a whole bunch of new challenges in the COVID times, but very exciting. Similar to Wendy, I too am very excited for some travel. Again, my family lives in Greece, and so missing them a bit, international waters. And one other different fun fact is I'm getting a puppy tomorrow. So I'm very excited about that. A new playful pet, very, very similar to a lot of other people in quarantine, but I'm very excited for that.
Thank you, Katrina. Petra?
Hey, I am Petra. I work at Roku. I do recruiting, managing of programs, and still everybody still recruits at Roku. It's a very hands-on, flat company. And I've been at Roku for like 4.5 years. I've spent half my time, the 20 years of my recruiting experience in Silicon Valley at startups, like early stage, and half at some larger companies. I'm going to give you 2 things because I think one of them Grant will appreciate. I recruited for a while at TriNet in the early 2000s, so a long time ago. Helped build out the office in Reno. Yeah. Yeah. But what you don't know about me, and I don't make this a secret, so some people do know this about me, when I am not recruiting and being a parent, I love to belly dance and I love Middle Eastern music. And so I play drum and I play finger cymbals and I love to dance. And in pre-COVID times, I ran a dance troupe. So we'll see what happens with that after COVID.
Thank you, Petra. Chuck?
Yeah, hi, I'm Chuck Conrad. I currently head go-to-market recruiting global go-to-market recruiting for Okta in the security space. Been in the industry for 30 years, doing all sorts of recruiting, leadership, executive search work. I guess something that most people don't know about me is what Andrew just mentioned. Prior to my recruiting career, I spent time in the NFL as a place kicker and a punter. So I like recruiting better.
He's a good punter, by the way, esteemed participants. And like I was telling him, if I did that, or that was my special, I mean, would you rather be a punter or love frogs? I don't know. I think I'll go with the NFL. Okay, so listen, let's start this off with kind of and just to get our signal straight, so we're all aligned. There's going to be, I don't know, 50 to 100 people on the call. Ultimately, they trickle in. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. Bev, my esteemed colleague, will distill them and feed them to me, and I'll make sure they get addressed. And then we're just going to kind of dive in and try to cover as much as we can. As I said at the outset of the call, this is you're really fortunate because you're going to get access to these talent acquisition practitioners who are, doing what you want insight on. And it's fascinating. I've certainly learned a lot. So let's start here. So you guys, I have two recent college graduates not living with me, but my kids, and they're entering the workforce. And it's obviously not a great time to be entering the workforce. And there's a lot of people that are out of work or changing jobs too. So it's not just recent college graduates. What kind of practical, and we'll get granular, but what kind of practical insight or observations do you have for people that are maybe struggling? How has this COVID thing impacted the career search, if at all? And what kind of overarching ideas or observations come to mind for you guys as you continue to practice your craft? And again, we're going to walk before we run. So Petra, I think I'm going to start with you, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everybody. So I think there's things that have changed in recruiting and job searches in the past 25, 30 years. I mean, technology has certainly, changed it a lot in terms of how we go about doing it. But the one thing that hasn't changed is your network. I think it's always important to go out there and find a way to get involved with people and, find connections in. It is always truth that as a recruiter, you're going to be told we have to check out and give kind of a little bit of preferential treatment to referrals. So it is worth your time to network and figure out, who you might know. And if you don't know anybody, find somebody who's willing to be a mentor for you. I think that there was a question in the chat regarding this, regarding career coaches versus something else. And, it's worth your time to find somebody who can help you do that. The career coach doesn't have to be doing the same thing you do. I think having a chemistry with that person and them being an understanding of your needs is probably more important than having the exact same skills that you need.
Thanks, Petra. Grant, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I see it. I see three things, right? I think you've got to be intentional about your career search. In days gone by, you could just hit the apply button and get into process. I think today you need to be much more intentional so that you stand out from the crowd. The top of the funnel is overflowing for most companies as there's more job seekers than we've had probably in the last 10 years. I think being prepared, right? So no longer can you turn up and as an informational first round interview. You really have to, again, stand out from the crowd by having knowledge of the company, good business acumen, knowing how your experience aligns, and really differentiating yourself from the competition. And then finally, I think we have to be resilient, right? In days gone by, there was the shortage of talent meant your opportunity to be hired into the role that you were either being approached for or applying for was far greater. And so we're going to have to be more used to rejection and dusting ourselves off and just getting back into the job search market. I agree with Petra that the network is imperative. Those that apply on LinkedIn, unfortunately, I'm running my own little pilot. And every now and again, if I see a job that's relevant, I apply. So far, I'm up to 52 applications on LinkedIn with no networking, just a pure application on LinkedIn. And I've less than a 5% response rate. Now, I might not be a good candidate. That could be a point. But I think the days of just applying on LinkedIn are gone. You have to take it further to the network.
Okay, so let's take a step back, and then that's because it's a really good point. One of the things I've noticed, this is the fourth panel we've done, is the general feedback from all the panelists was, hey, really have a plan, be intentional, and in other words, I think there's two ways to go about this. One is to kind of spray and pray and apply to a lot of jobs on job boards or LinkedIn, or maybe directly to the career feed from a company's site. But in addition to that, you should be incredibly intentional about the jobs that you apply for, and maybe go outside the confines or the guardrails of the system, the applicant tracking system. In other words, I often say, and it sparked a lot of controversy, I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on this. Hey, the best job to apply for is the one that doesn't exist. So what's preventing me from reaching out to, say, Grant, independent of anything, and saying, hey, Grant, I really want to be an HR coordinator or a sourcer. You look really smart and handsome and cool. What's it going to take? And so the feedback from the different panelists was interesting, because a lot of the group said, hey, that's okay, but we have a system in place for a reason, to stay organized and keep things, flowing in the right direction. So if you're going to go outside the system, in some respects, you might be shooting yourself in the foot. But to your comment, Grant, about standing out and being different, that going outside the system kind of lends itself to that vein of thought. So Wendy, what do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that?
I think standing out absolutely makes sense. You do have to differentiate yourself because there are so many applicants now. And to go outside of the system, one thing with regards to our company is that we do post everything that we currently have open. However, there might be positions opening up down the road that aren't posted yet, and we don't advertise about today. So if you want to differentiate yourself and reach out to a TA leader or a recruiter directly to just introduce yourself, do it in a respectful way. As Grant mentioned, do your research on the organization, on why that company is a good fit for you, what you can deliver and bring to the organization as an applicant and as an employee, because a big part of what we look for is culture fit. So is there a match not only just technically, in terms of skill set, but is this person going to match our core values? So if you're reaching out, do it in a respectful manner, do your research ahead of time, do it in a way where if you're trying to differentiate yourself, we'll make sure you have the information ready so that you can position yourself in a positive fashion.
That's good feedback. Chuck, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit on something. I do a lot of work with military veterans, and there's 250,000 veterans that transition every year into the workforce. And I think it applies to vets, it applies to new grads, and it applies to professionals. I think a lot of the principles that people have spoken about already apply, but there's some things that I haven't heard yet. And one of the things is there's networks out there that you're not even thinking about. So for example, if I'm a new college grad, I'll hit up my first level network within LinkedIn, but I'm going to go look for, here's what you need to do. You need to build a target list of companies that you're looking to get into. This is what we do to do an executive search. Build a target list of where you want to go work. Then look at the roles that are available there, and then do research on every single one of those companies and find somebody there that may have went to your university. Find somebody there that may have served in a similar outfit that you did in the military. Find somebody there who worked at a company that you may have worked at in the past, and leverage that individual in the company to differentiate yourself into the company. You're no longer now just in the pool of candidates going into the ATS. You're actually going to be, your resume will be emailed from an employee into a recruiter, or an employee into a hiring manager. And the employee inside is going to have a little skin in the game. They actually make money if you get hired. So leverage the internal people there. Look at them. Look at the executives. If you have an executive that went to your alma mater, I go to the executive. Say, look, I'm very interested in your company. Here's why. we also have to be realistic, right? We have to make sure that we fit the roles and we have the skills for the roles. But these are networks that people don't often think about, that this is how you can differentiate yourself by taking a different path. Every single recruiter, I think, on this call has gotten an email with a resume from an executive saying, this person was referred to me, and we look at it and we say, maybe not a fit. But because it came from the executive, guess what happens? The person gets a phone call. So keep that in mind, that going through the traditional route just puts you in with everybody else. Think a little bit outside the box of what other entry points can you find? People who have been at similar companies, similar roles, similar life experiences from similar cities, and leverage those folks inside companies to help get you in front of people.
Chuck, that's great input. And so two things. One, Wendy's spot on. If you're gonna do it, be respectful, but definitely do it. The extra effort is, there's a lot of research around the fact that if you're referred in, or you come in through different channels concurrently, the likelihood of you being considered are in I think 3x or 4x. So and the other thing I would say is, if you're, the one thing that I've noticed in each one of these panels, and I want to make sure this point comes across, is you guys really want to hire people. I mean, it's not like I did this the other one. It's not like, no, it's not like that at all. You guys really want to make the right hire. So anything a candidate can do to get them in position, the easier they make it for you to talk to them or consider them, the more likely it is that they're going to do it. With the caveat to Wendy's point, I remember one situation where a person went over the recruiter's head because they weren't satisfied with the treatment, and that really blew up. I mean, you don't want to alienate the recruiter or the system. So your comment about being professional and respectful, Wendy's spot on. Okay, let's drill down a little bit and talk overarching about profiles and resumes and cover letters. It's subjective, but I think there's some basic etiquette or hygiene around that. I'm of the mind that less is more, which, as most of you know, is a challenge for me. So because I just have so much to say and I want to get it all across. So I really work at condensing and consolidating. One of the key points in the earlier panel was, don't focus so much on what you did, but what was the result of what you did? What were the accomplishments? But again, not necessarily including everything, every single thing I did on my profile or resume. I mean, the stats are pretty staggering. I think roughly on average 250 resumes per open rec. And so recruiters spending 7 seconds on a resume. So Katrina, we haven't heard from you. What are your thoughts on content, format of resumes, LinkedIn profiles, best practices?
Yeah, so from a resume perspective, I agree with you completely. Less is more, and really kind of focusing on what is the impact of the action that you took, right? So there's kind of core work and core responsibilities that we all do in our day-to-day, and that's awesome. But what's really helpful to highlight on a resume is, what did that actually result in? What was the impact of those actions, and how did that change things to make them better? Did it improve by a certain percentage? That's why on a lot of these kind of career sites or tips, it says like, what is the impact statement of the work that you actually did? So really focusing on that piece. And then to your point, Andrew, on, a recruiter takes a few seconds looking at your resume, make sure that it's really clear that you're a fit from the first page view. So the top of the page, you don't want to bog it down with a very long, dense summary of what you've done or key skills that are really just keywords. You really want to make sure, okay, at a quick glance, I can see, okay, this person might be a fit, so that you hook the recruiter into looking and spending a little more time reading through your experience. Same thing for LinkedIn, less is more there as well. Make sure it's clear what you're working on and what you've done. So, someone on the outside looking at your experience can say, oh, this person, is worth a phone call to learn more about their background. But no need to kind of go into full detail on a LinkedIn page. And then for cover letters, I think it really is company specific for cover letters. So at a larger company, I think cover letters are less important than at a smaller company, where there are fewer applications to get get through. This is, of course, more preference depending on the talent leaders and you know, where people are finding. But I found at smaller companies, you really want to make them personalized. If you're going to spend the time to submit a cover letter, make sure it's very specific to the role. Make sure you've done some research about the company and you're showcasing how you're a fit for that company, how you can add value, as opposed to, you know, your very typical "thank you for considering my application."
You know, that's such good feedback, Katrina, because you touched on a couple of really good things. One is customizing your outreach to the job description. It takes longer, it's harder, but being intentional about it. And one of the comments in a prior panel from Brad Cook was the STAR. I think is it situation, target, action, result, but adding a structure, a framework for what you're trying to accomplish instead of just, here's all my stuff, and letting the person figure it out. Very helpful. And then I like saying this, by the way, if you're looking for a job or you're in your career search right now and you're not good at it, that's very positive. That's not something you want to be good at. Being good at getting a job is like being good at dating. It's not something you want to be good at. So know that if you're looking for a job right now and you don't think you're good at it, or you don't have a ton of experience, that's very positive. And that's the good news. So, okay, does any of the panelists want to respond or address what Katrina talked about? Petra, go ahead.
Yeah. So, you know, I've always got something to say. So hopefully it's relevant. I do agree with Katrina and with Chuck that it's important to be concise on a resume, but it is a marketing piece, right? The job of that resume is to get the recruiter or the hiring manager to pay attention to it. And sometimes you can be so short that I'm having to think through, okay, what did you mean by that? And if you should be walking me through what you meant by that to tell me what the impact was, as opposed to just say, you know, I coded in C++. Okay, maybe because you're a software engineer, I'll look further, but because you're a precious commodity in Silicon Valley, but it's really more effective. And my usual counsel with people is, yeah, keep it about a page, but if you're worrying about making, you know, an 8-point font to get it to one page, please give my old eyes a break, and you know, put your technical skills on the second page. Like, it's not going to kill anybody. There's not like an absolute. You're not going to end up in hell for, you know, your resume going 2 lines onto a second page. And I really love what Katrina said about cover letters. My usual advice to people is to keep it under half a page. Just give me a few bullet points about why you're the perfect person for the job. And really super important, and this, I see this more often than not, and it just makes me cry to see, cringe and then cry. When it says, "Dear Apple recruiter," and guess what? I'm not at Apple. So just make sure that on your resume and on your cover letter that you are, you know, you're spell checking and you're fact checking and making sure that you've got the right information on there. I see it all the time.
No wonder you never got back to me. Hey, so listen, I want to talk about that for a second. So, because the personalizing and the effort and the context and the research is super important. But I agree with you. Just the takeaway for me is resumes and LinkedIn profiles don't get you jobs. They get you interviews. So it's something you have to have. There's been a couple questions about having someone, a career coach or someone help you with your job search. And I think that's incredibly important to the extent that you need help or guidance figuring out what you want to do. One of the frustrations I've heard repeatedly from talking to people, the panelists and your peers, is you're not career coaches. In other words, when someone gets to that interview and then you're having a conversation, you know, it's really important to have a direction, to have a goal, have an intention, and so you don't spend a lot of time, you know, oh gosh, well I could do this and I love that, and I think that happens too often. So a career coach can help you with that. And I also think it's helpful to take some sort of, you know, self-assessment. There's a lot of tools out there that help you figure out what your strengths are, and so on and so forth. Another one of the things that came up with the other panelists, let's see, how do I want to go about this? Well, it was talking versus stalking. In other words, where do you guys and it's subjective. Where do you draw the line between someone, like most of you know Gail, she said, hey, if you look at a recruiter's profile or the hiring manager's profile and it says they love scuba diving and you like scuba diving, we'll dial that up. And because a lot of times what you connect on isn't necessarily the meat and potatoes of the resume, but it's the sizzle, it's the little things, it's where the person volunteers or what they're passionate about. Do you guys have a feeling on that? Chuck, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's overdoing it, so you have to be careful. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to, I think hitting on something that may be in somebody's profile, a hobby, or I get it all the time. I get it all the time from, not necessarily from candidates. I get it from people trying to sell me recruiting products, right? They'll talk about whatever hobbies I had or where I went to school, et cetera. I think it kind of plays into what I said earlier, which is leverage you, right? And leverage where you went to school, leverage the groups that you're in, leverage hobbies that you may have, leverage work companies you've worked for in the past, and find the people that are at the companies that share those with you and go through them. They're going to be more apt and more motivated to help you than just sending it in through a recruiter. And you know, Katrina's nailed it. I mean, people don't read resumes first; they look at them. That you literally look at a resume, and if it doesn't look good, it's not going to get read. So, you know, keep things clean. But yeah, if it goes overboard, people are going to look at you like a stalker, and that's not going to help you in your job search. So leverage maybe one little point, but I wouldn't overdo it.
Grant, Wendy, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I agree with Chuck. There's a fine balance. I think you've got to know or have some inclination of the profile of the individual that you're trying to find the commonality with, right? There are, an extrovert is probably going to be much more inclined to sync up on a commonality, whereas an introvert, you might create distance with them. Because they think that the familiarization is uncomfortable. So I would start with really, personally, I think it's aligning yourself to the role and the need and trying to find how you best fit and stand out against that. And I think using the network in the right way and being respectful. Sometimes I get people applying to me and saying, hey, I grew up in South Africa too. South Africa is a big country and there were a lot of people there, right? I think just saying that, finding a commonality and using it in a very superficial way, I don't think helps as much as you expect. One other thing I would make is somebody mentioned the operational excellence of having spelling mistakes and the format of your resume. Also making sure that your resume and your LinkedIn profile are consistent. And I'm not wedded to one or the other, right? But I think there's a growing trend where people are having disparate data out there, and it comes to fruition when a background check gets done. And so if you are in a career search, make sure you're intentional, make sure that you're excellent, and you're consistent.
That's good feedback. One of the things that came up a few times is the relevance or importance of customizing your resume to the job description, which seemed to be overall a really good idea. But to your point, maybe not at the expense of having too many different versions. I think the net is the takeaway for me, and I'd love for someone else to jump in, is you're going to get out of it what you put into it. If you mail it in, they're going to mail it back to you. If you FedEx it, they'll FedEx, and it's a metaphor, people. But if you hand deliver it, then and drop it off with it, then they'll hand deliver it. But if you don't take the time to proofread it and it's sloppy, then that's important. I just want to also say something that has come up several times is you guys are as motivated to hire the right person as they are to find the right job, probably more so because you've got some compliance stuff and some policies and procedures that you have to adhere to. You can't really just start doing stuff indiscriminately. So to that end, a lot of times the people want the job and they're not the right fit. Maybe to your point, Wendy, it's a culture thing, but the person won't be successful. So but they're convinced they are. So that's a subtle dance. And my response to that is always, listen, it's a numbers game. Someone wants to hire you. You're good at something and you'd be an asset to something. The challenge isn't whether or not you can do it. The challenge is finding the right fit, the right person, and doing the action and then executing and not getting discouraged because, you didn't get what you want when you wanted it, which is a real challenge for me. Okay, well, so let's shift gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about what to do. Petra mentioned, typos are a bad thing. What are some things that you discourage people from doing, or you recommend that they don't do, along the lines of your experience? And I'm going to go to you again, Katrina.
Happy to. I think the first thing that popped into mind when you mentioned that is similar to actually what you were saying earlier, is that spray and pray method. So within a company's applicant tracking system, we can see every role that you've applied to. So if you're going onto the site and you're just submitting your resume for every, say, entry-level position, we see that. And then that doesn't scream intentionality. That doesn't say, okay, this person's very thoughtfully thinking about where they could be a good fit. So that would be my quick takeaway on, if as you find positions, look at all of the ones that you're qualified for, especially, if you are a more entry-level person. You mentioned, son's just graduating from college. See where do your interests lie, and really take a more targeted approach to that specific role, and take that extra time that you would spend submitting your same resume 5 times to different roles to make sure that it fits really well for that one role in particular, and kind of go full force ahead for that role.
Okay, that's good. Anybody else want to dip in their oar? Wendy?
Yeah, just be honest, be truthful in everything that you're doing, because, as Katrina said, we document everything that happens when we're interacting with you in our applicant tracking system. And so, if you create, and talking about customizing resumes, I'm all for it, but you've got to be honest on your resume. So if you're embellishing things and that comes out during the recruiting process, we're going to make note of that. So, stay honest with yourself, honest with the companies that you're applying for, and just be sure that, during the entire process, whether it's resume writing or interviewing, be truthful, because that will definitely make sure that, the companies notice that you're being your own self.
Good. Yeah.
Sorry, Andrew,
Grant, go.
One other comment. So I think pre-COVID, we had a very different environment where there was a shortage of talent. And so you could be slightly industry agnostic in your career search. As post-COVID, the talent pool or the top of funnel has got full again. Think about, I might be in one industry and would like to go and work in a different industry. And that's my preference. For the organization that's hiring, they might right now be able to be more selective around choosing somebody that has direct relevant experience. And so again, just be measured around, if you're working in consumer goods and you want to get into tech, is that the most intentional route for you to take right now? And if you've got your heart set on moving into tech, that's fine. But then think about all the things that you're going to need to do around networking and patience, right? Because the job you want in tech might take longer, and you might have to take something that's a bit left or right field of what you originally were targeting.
That is perfect. And so it's funny you say that, Grant, because I forget if it was Phil, it might have been David, but someone said just what you said. And it goes back to what Wendy said about being authentic and not overstating what you've done or said, because sometimes there's gaps in the resume, or it's like you kind of want to hide them. But Phil's comment was, no, fill that in. Maybe you were taking care of an elderly parent. Maybe you were whatever you were doing. Maybe you joined the Peace Corps, but there might be a story behind it. And oftentimes, again, it's not the meat and potatoes, it's the sizzle of what you've done, and the net, like Katrina said, what was the result? What did you accomplish? What was the takeaway? And how can that help you elevate your game here? In other words, it's almost what you said, Grant. We don't want to hire a bunch of people just like us. We want new people and different people with different experiences. So if there's a reticence or reluctance to talk about the gaps, don't. I mean, whatever it is, it is. And no one has gotten through this COVID thing unscathed. So I think there's more now, more so than ever, a willingness and a desire to be far more forgiving and understanding about those sorts of things. So another thing that came up, and love to hear your thoughts on this, you guys, is so I'm being good at getting a job isn't something you want to be good at, but you do have to up your game and you do have to work at and so having a buddy and making the most of your downtime by maybe joining some association groups, getting a certification, watching YouTube videos, role playing with friends. What are some things that come to mind for you that you like to see candidates doing while they're, I don't want to say idle, but while they're, while they're in the throes of their career search? Let's do Chuck.
I think if you're idle, you got to stay busy. You got to show passion around something you're doing. That's the first piece. I think if I was going to play off of the question about career coaches and coaching, that's the time to do something, right? I would even recommend find an interview coach. Find somebody who can actually teach you the inner workings of interviewing. I do interview coaching at my company. I teach all the employees how to interview talent. And there's some very simple things you can do as a candidate to go in and actually set yourself apart in the interview. And you could learn those things while you're down. So I would say pick things up, show passion in an area that you want to get into in downtime. And the second piece would be, or get yourself better at interviewing. And one of the tips I would give you is for every role, say for example, if there's a tech support role, we're looking at core competencies. What would be a core competency to be a great tech support engineer or tech support person? And I think one of them would be something like empathy. And so be prepared to come to your interview with examples of in your work experience where you've had to show empathy towards, maybe you've had an angry customer in the past who's called you, and you can give these living examples of where you showed empathy, because that's what they're trying to find. They're trying to find what are your core competencies, because your core competencies are what's going to predict success and performance in the job. And so you have to break down the job by competencies and then prepare yourself with examples that highlight those competencies when you go into that interview room. So those would be my two things. Learn, get better at interviewing, and show some passion around what you want to do.
Petra, you want to dip in your oar?
Yeah, sure. So I agree with everything that Chuck said. And additionally to that, I think self-care is really important, when you're trying to find a job, especially if you're not working, right? And, keeping a schedule of some sort, making sure you're doing some kind of exercise. And, maybe that's going and, I don't know, taking a walk around the block or going up to, take a hike or whatever it is. But, keeping yourself healthy physically is going to help keep you mentally healthy, right? And it is stressful to look for a job. It's easy to get obsessive. So to Chuck's point, finding an interview coach and making sure you've got somebody who you can be your sounding board, right? You don't want to keep your frustration inside, because it's just going to make it come out in weird ways when you interview. I'm going to tell you a specific example right now. I'm going to not use the person's name because that would be very unempathetic. But he vented to me, and which is okay, but also vented to another interviewer about how hard it was to interview right now. And he spent so much time, with this, and you could tell he had this hardened attitude and was resentful, and it came off, and it made us not want to hire him. So do what you need to do to maintain a positive attitude during your interviews. And that's going to mean a lot of self-care. So give yourself permission to do that.
Petra, you promised you wouldn't tell anybody. That's embarrassing. Okay, it wasn't me, but it could have been me. And that's a great point, because I don't know, all these panels are blending together, but someone's comment was, we're going to remember, you may not be I think Grant, you touched on it. We may not be considering you for a role right now, but something may come up downstream. And I think, Katrina, you mentioned you're keeping track of all this stuff. So you never know how it's going to play out. So I think it's the takeaway for me about what you just said, Petra, is to you know, accept no gracefully. It's not always, sometimes no is God's ultimate protection. So if you can, you know, I've learned over the years to become a much better loser and not, I mean, I'm a great winner, surprise, surprise, but get a lot better about handling rejection and realizing it's not always about me. And self-care is a great thing. So I purposely focus the bulk of the time on the how do you get to the interview phase, because I think that's where most of the heavy lifting takes place. But let's talk a little bit about interviewing, best practices, do's, don'ts. So obviously it's shifted primarily to phone and video. What are some things that you guys look for or that you recommend as it relates to video interviewing that are, let's call it blocking and tackling? Wendy, would love to hear from you.
Well, I think as a candidate going in for an video interview, you know, test your screen, test your microphone. You want to make sure that things run smoothly, because this is the impression you're giving to the prospective employer. You know, make sure that you are dressed for success, because just because you're not meeting your prospective employer face to face, it's all about your appearance. And so I think, you know, those are important things to keep in mind. You know, we've put together just a video interviewing guide that we actually send to candidates, just because we're in, you know, a new space now. Ever since a few months ago, you know, everybody is now working remotely, and we're hiring remotely too. So just some tips and best practices, you know, even the lighting, you know, don't put your camera in front of a window, because that's going to cast a glare. And so, you know, you want to cast obviously a good impression to your prospective employer. You know, be prepared with questions. Be prepared with, you mentioned, you know, the STAR interview techniques. You know, most companies are going to be asking you behavioral-based questions. So be sure you've got specific examples about your past work experience that you can bring to the table. You know, what occurred, what actions you took, what were the results, and, you know, be specific with your answers, because your interviewers are going to be looking for that information. I think, you know, finally, you know, with the video interview format, you know, you have to be prepared for the unexpected. What if your internet goes out? You know, what's going to occur, just in case? You know, have your information or your interviewer's information readily available in case, you know, your interview does get cut off for some reason. So there's always going to be things that you know, happen that are unexpected. You know, your dog could jump into your lap and surprise you. So things can happen, and just stay calm, you know, and, you know, be persistent. And, you know, we understand this is a unique situation, a unique time for everybody. And I think, you know, most companies are very understanding if things do occur that don't go smooth 100% of the time. So those would be some of the things that I would suggest.
Wendy, that's really good stuff. Some of the other things that came up when I asked that question were along the lines of what you just said. You know, Juliet was on a panel earlier, Petra, and she said, use your hands. Like, people want to see that you're engaged, and don't just, you know, don't be a statue. Smile obviously was one of them. And yeah, be mindful of the scenery. But another comment that was, I thought, very, very sage was, don't be, so listen, it's life. Like, everyone's working at home. You might have seen my son walking around in the background. Maybe I did get a puppy, or maybe I'm gonna get a puppy, or whatever, but life's gonna happen around me. So it's not, you know, you have to be authentic, but you at the same time need to be respectful and prepared. I love that. Does anybody, I heard a good one. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you, Grant, but before I do, I had a good one, and it's kind of my own, so that's why I probably like it so much. But I do a lot of this stuff on video and with Zoom, and it's, if I'm in a, like, energy doesn't lie, right? So if you're kind of, it's hard to be all chipper and, you know, and it's puppies and ice cream, but if I don't have a job and I'm scrambling to make the ends meet, you know, maybe I don't want to come off like that. So watching something, a quick prank, I love the prank YouTube videos, until I find out they're scripted, then I get all bummed out. But until then, I like something really funny. So I just go into the interview with a good mindset, you know, smiling, happy. Grant, what did you want to say?
Yeah, so some best practices. I think people need to be careful that because they sit on Zoom calls or team calls all day long, that they're naturally going to be good at video interviewing. That's a mistake we're seeing. And so the encouragement is practice actually video interviewing, right? Find a friend, find a partner. You can do it on FaceTime and really just learn the etiquette and get comfortable with it. I'm doing this now, and so this is I'm breaking my own rule, but don't do the audio and the video on the same technology. So I usually dial in through my phone so that if the internet goes down, I can still be in conversation with the person. We don't lose the momentum, because otherwise you're faffing around trying to get reconnected. I think from interview questions, there are a lot of tools out there. Candidate mentioned to me the other day that in preparation for an interview with us, they went on to Glassdoor and they looked at candidates post interview questions or do a summary of what questions they were asked, and so they got a sense for what the types of questions were that we asked at TriNet. Now, do I think that is gaming the system a little bit? Yes, but I also thought it was good preparation, right? They went out, they looked, and they looked at us and some competitors. And then I think, you practice using a format. And Andrew, I think you mentioned that the STAR methodology, it's out there. Add the L to it and call it style, and use the L as what did I learn, right? And a lot of the times candidates want to give you a positive experience where they were successful. We also like to see the examples where you failed, right? Because where you failed is where you see the greatest learnings and the reflections on what to do better next time. So balance it out. Good examples and positive examples are strong, but also those failed examples where you had greater learning. So those are some of the extra tips when it comes to the video interviewing.
I think it was great that you added that, Grant, the L on the end, and actually I would throw an A on the end too. And not only what you learned, but how are you applying that learning in your job today? So if you could take it that deep on a question on an interview, you're going to impress the interviewer. I promise you that.
Ah, that's good. I think maybe we should add a C on that for cool. I'm kidding. I just wanted to be part of the team. Okay, Katrina, how about you weigh in? What are some things that come to mind at Box that you look for or don't look for in video interviewing?
Yeah, so it's a new experience for both sides, right? So I totally agree with Grant and what Chuck had said around making sure that you're thinking through your answers, being comprehensive, reflecting on your involvement and what you could do differently, how you could apply it in new situations, and taking all of those learnings. But on the other side too, the interviewer is also probably not as used to evaluating that as well. So I think there's some humanity to remember in those as, we go on to these calls as well, that this is new for all of us. And we've only been doing this for a couple of months. And so, those kind of hiccups happen, and that's okay. And some advice, just if a hiccup does happen, is just laugh about it with them too, right? You can bring some lightness to the conversation, just recognizing we're all in this situation together. And so, not a ton to add. I think they covered a lot, but just remembering that we're all human in this new experience, and it's all okay.
That's very powerful, Katrina, because I think you're right. There's a tendency, oh my God, I've got this one chance to, and I'm going all in, all my chips are going on, and then my dog starts barking, or, something weird happens, and then I'm off my game, and then I'm in my head, and then it's like, it's not that. I love what you said, Grant. I think I personally have I want to put forth this image of polish and poise and grace, and the truth is no, you never learn anything. You only learn when you fail, and it's not a failure if you learn something. And so I love that. Don't have to break into the Thomas Edison 2,500 ways to not build a light bulb, but it's not unlike that. I love that disposition. And I also just love, if you're a participant, you can see these they're just people just like us. They want to do the right thing. They haven't figured it all out. We're all trying to find our way. So that's a very positive input, Katrina. One of the things that came up on yesterday, and it was, again, Phil from Zoom, not trying to put Phil on a pedestal, but his point was, be curious. Be curious. When you're curious, it lets the interviewer know that you're engaged, that you're committed. You're asking questions. And that's a, and so, and you don't want to feign it as much as just be mindful of it. I think there's a tendency, I don't want to make any mistakes, so I don't express myself, or I don't, I don't show everything because I don't want to make a mistake. So, Petra's flagging me. Go, Petra.
Well, so you just said about be curious, and I actually got a great piece of advice from somebody who wasn't giving it to me. It was Sarah Vowell, and I don't know if any of you know who she is. She's a commentator and writer. She is on This American Life, that radio show on NPR sometimes. And she said that when she was a journalist, what she did, her thing was that she would follow the most interesting thread that anybody said while they were talking, regardless of where it took her. And it may take you off the straight and narrow, but it's going to show you, as an interviewer, it's going to show you more about the human that you're talking to. And as a candidate, it will show that curiosity. Because if somebody mentions something during an interview, if I, as an interviewer, and ask you a specific question, and then we have a conversation, if you take the most interesting thing, that's going to show engagement, and that you're curious and interested. And it's not a matter of trying to stroke the person you're interviewing. It's a matter of having good technique in terms of staying engaged in the conversation. And what we're talking about right now is one of the things is all the distractions and the things that can go awry while we're in this bizarre new medium that we're all trying to figure out, right? So anything you can do to stay personally engaged with that and not be checking your other devices, whatever it is you're doing on the side, is going to help you. So staying curious by following what is interesting to you in the conversation will help.
Thanks,
I
Petra.
would take that. I'd take that even further, Petra. I totally agree with you. I'd take it to make sure you go into an interview prepared to ask at minimum one different question of each interviewer that you're meeting with.
Meaningful question. Yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
because
yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I got in a room with feedback and someone says, "Oh, they didn't even ask me any questions." And for them, it's like thumbs down because they didn't even ask a question. Now I have to talk them off of that because that's not the right attitude to have as an interviewer. Maybe the person already ran out of questions, but I'm going to tell you as candidates, have questions ready for every single interviewer, because I think I've heard that more than almost any other excuse that interviewers have made to pass on somebody's because they didn't have any questions. So have questions ready for everybody and have different questions ready to go.
Besides, how much dough am I going to make? Don't ask that question more than
exactly.
4 times.
Exactly.
And the other thing, Justin, you all said it in different ways, is just be authentic. Like it's not worthwhile to project some image of something that doesn't exist because you think it's going to get you. I mean, don't pretend to be curious. I mean, it's not a game. And I'll just harken back to something that was said earlier that I think is super important. You may not, listen, if I want to be an astronaut, it might make sense for me to just go get a job at the Palo Alto Municipal Airport parking cars as a start. So I'm near aircraft. So I think there's some nothing's off limits if you ask me. There's no shame in getting something. I mean, all roads lead to Rome. So doing something close to what you want to do. And the other thing is, and I think someone talked about it, is having a mentor or a coach who do you know and who do you like that seems to be well adjusted, enjoying what they're doing. And just shadow them. People want to help. People want to get engaged. And I think oftentimes, I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking for a quick fix or a hack. And a lot of times there's not. And something is significant. I mean, this isn't a shoe buy. This is a serious thing. So you want to do your homework, and people will be willing to have informational interviews. But they're not going to spend more time on it and then you do. And if you're half-baked, then your help's probably going to be half-baked. Okay. Anything else on the do's and don'ts with respect to, and there was a question about, is it cool to talk negatively about your former employer? I'm going to go out on a limb. It feels more like a branch, and say it's not a good idea to talk negatively about prior employers. I just think there's no value in that. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, and they're not even unmuting themselves. That's how bad of an idea that is, people. So, okay, so we're kind of at the end, and what I like to do here is, let each of you say okay, you can only say one thing, one word, and I'm almost going to say the one. In fact, I'm going to make it really harder on you guys. And it can be a sentiment. It doesn't need to be one word, but one word would be good. So you get to impart one word of wisdom, one belief, one bit of advice or coaching or guidance to the people that are listening, but you only get one. What would that be? And I'm going to steal thunder and tell you what they were. The last panel. Actually, I won't. I'll leave it wide open because maybe you guys, and I'll fill in the gaps if nobody hits them. And then obviously how people that are listening can connect with you. Your preferred method of connecting, if you're available for connecting on LinkedIn, the best way that you want to do that. So again, your parting word, and then how do people connect with you? And I'm going to start with Wendy.
So my one word piece of advice for all of you is practice. So practice at writing your resume, practice at interviewing, practice at creating your questions to bring to your interviews, practice at writing your thank you notes that you want to send after your interviews occur. So anything you can do to practice to be prepared, will help you throughout your search process. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to accept your invite. I think there's a question about sharing the Zoom video interview tips.
Yeah.
Connect with me and I'll be happy to share that with you.
Thanks, Wendy. And that's good. That was not one of the words, so good for you. All right, I realize that I'm making it harder and harder as we go along. So let's give, Katrina, I'm gonna make you wait. Let's do Chuck.
I was going to say be prepared, but apparently Wendy.
Yeah, that's off the table.
I would say have a plan and stay organized with that plan. If you have a plan on what you want to do, build it out. Build your target list of companies. Build your target list of people you want to reach out to in those companies. Be organized. Be methodical, and eventually you'll find the right situation.
Okay, and how do people connect with you, Chuck?
I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Chuck Conrad with a K, and I'm there.
And if it is for what it's worth, I think it took me 11 years of trying to connect with Chuck. So you're going to need to be patient. The race to quality has no finish line. It's not how you start, it's how you finish.
It wasn't 11 years.
Chuck can run really fast. No, but the other thing you said, I just want to pile on. I know it's your word, but goals are so important. I'm never not amazed. When you write something down, I think it increases the likelihood of it happening like 4 times, some phenomenal factor like that. But if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. And if you keep headed where you're going, you are going to get there. So I cannot reinforce. And I don't, like when I hear goals, I think, oh God, no, I don't want to have goals because then I'm going to have to meet them. And then, I'm going to have to check if I met them, and no goals. But having a plan, Chuck, that's a good one. Okay, let's move right along to Petra.
I've got a bunch of words here. I'm going to say persistence. I'm going to say persistence, because that provides that goes through everything that Wendy and Conrad said, and just keeping with it. And to your point, Andrew, there's someone out there who wants to hire you for the awesome skills and the awesome person that you are. And having an attitude like that is going to help you break through things, and find a way to represent that persistence in your life in a concrete way. So there's lots of ways that we can do that. Yeah, I can talk more about that some other time. You can connect with me best on LinkedIn. I'm on it all the time, so I'm easy to find, and happy to connect with you.
Thanks, Patron. I just want to pile on with the persistence, because persistence is so hard. It's that right. It's like it's always darkest before dawn. Tough times don't last. Tough people do. But it's right when you're about to break through. That's when the universe, I don't want to get into semantics, but that it's purposely designed. Life is purposely designed to make it so tough so that right when you're about to break through, right at that tipping point, and I cannot reinforce it because you're right. Someone does want to hire you and it's hard on purpose. But I forget who said it, but it was really well done. It was kind of like, hey, listen, if you don't show up, nothing's going to happen. Okay. If you show up, nothing may happen. but something, if you keep showing up, something will happen. But if you don't show up, nothing will happen. So I like persistence. Okay, let's do Grant. Sorry, Katrina. Hope there's some words left for you.
So I would use the word open. Be open to learning, be open to feedback, be open to new connections, be open to new ways of working and operating. And I think that openness, I posted a link to a YouTube video, which is above and below the line, and it's an artist that narrates what that means. And when we're open, we just in a much more positive space, and again we attract the positivity when we're in that frame of mind. To get hold of me, LinkedIn is the best. I would also encourage those that are job seeking. I have a team of recruiters, so please look at the TriNet recruiters and identify which recruiter is most aligned to your functional area. That will probably accelerate your job search. But happy to connect. But there's a team that I serve that can help you as well.
Wow, I like that. That was not one of the words that was used. And if you're listening, that's an open invitation to drop Grant's name. And he's got a team of recruiters. So make sure you go to TriNet and look at the job feed. And that's really good. I like that. I would add vulnerability to being open, right? Vulnerability is the first thing we want from other people, and it's the last thing we're able to give. That's Brene Brown. Okay, Katrina, why don't you put a big bow on it and land the plane?
Well, I totally agree with Grant, and my word was actually also open for similar reasons, but also different. I think sometimes if we're so kind of narrow-minded on a certain thing that we think that we want, we miss the huge opportunity that's right next to us. Or right in front of our face that we actually aren't seeing, so we're focused on something else. But I'll let you keep openness, and I'll shift it to alignment. So I think that as you're going through a job search, it's super important that you are in alignment with what you want in your career, you're kind of driving towards and being intentional, to Chuck's point about where you're going. You're also in alignment with the job that you're looking for. Does it actually hit on the values that you care about? Are you a good fit for that role objectively? And how can you make sure that you're kind of aligning yourself to a path that makes sense for you, that is going to bring you fulfillment in your role, and can align with the different recruiters and hiring teams to really set yourself up for success in the next role.
Oh, that's good, Katrina. And how do people connect with you, Katrina?
LinkedIn, just like the rest of us, on LinkedIn all the time. My last name has a lot of vowels, so it can be difficult, but feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Would be happy to chat.
How do you pronounce it?
The Greek pronunciation is Georgiou, and the English pronunciation is Giorgio.
I like the Greek one. You should have made me try before you answered. We've all gotten a good laugh. Okay, so thank you, Katrina. And so my word is, just so you know, some of the other words that came up: patience, fearless, research, know your audience, accountability. It all kind of runs together after a while. But I like fearless. And by the way, or courage maybe. And courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is doing it. I've noticed that if I'm intimidated or if I have some reticence or reluctance or discomfort, then I should probably lean in instead of leaning back. And so courage, just courage to show up and tell your truth. You'll be shocked by the time you're halfway through. And so that's my word is courage. And they're all good words. And so, listen, I want to thank the panelists for their time. You guys, thanks so much. A lot of good stuff here, wisdom and insight and feedback. If you're still on the call, reach out to these people independent. I like Chuck's, who is it, Grant or Chuck? Someone said, don't just, figure out, maybe it was the earlier call, figure out their email address. If you're in the LinkedIn messaging platform, you're going to be it with everyone else, but figure out how to reach out to them directly without LinkedIn. You'll be glad you did. These guys are wizards. You can find me on LinkedIn apparently, but also my email address is andrew@thehierkey.com, THEHIREKEY. I'm happy to talk to any of you individually and give you my thoughts on on what to do, and connect and network. People want to help. Thank you, esteemed panelists. There'll be a recording of this call. Everybody have a great Wednesday. Thank you, Bev, for doing all the chatting. And is there something? No? Smiling? Oh, everyone's just waving goodbye. Hey, the people that had their video on and the smiling, that's very powerful. I don't, all I can see is ARACEL. You've been smiling the whole time. Good for you. I hope it was worthwhile. Okay, everybody. Panelists, whatever they're paying you, double it. Everybody else, keep going. Thanks, Anita. Good to see you. Bye, everybody.